And greetings, saints of the Most High. Welcome to another installment of the Messianic Torah Observer. I'm Rod Thomas, coming at you from a brisk fall preparation day here in the DFW. And I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to fellowship with me. And as always, it is my hope, trust, and prayer that this installment of TMTO finds you, your families, and your fellowships well and blessed. As I am recording and publishing this installment of TMTO, it is December 5, or December 5th, 2025, or more pertinent to our faith community, the 13th day of the 9th month of Yah's biblical calendar year. I am ecstatic to be back with you after such a long hiatus. As those of you who have been following me for some time or may not know, we have been on a mission trip to Kenya, Hillary and I. You may also recall that we made a similar trip to Kenya in 2024, where we were gone for an entire month. Well, this year, 2025, our mission trip lasted 3 months. It's a long time. It's a long time to be in a foreign country, and it's a long time to be away from TMTO, the Messianic Torah Observer. But we are very, very happy to be back home and having gotten back to the grind and acclimated back to Central Time here in Texas. And we are ready to be about our Father's business yet again. What I want to do in this post, and I'm not going to take too much of your time up today, is to update you on this ministry, update you on what we've been about, what we were up to in Kenya for so many weeks, for 3 months, what our plans are for TMTO moving forward for the remainder of this and next year, and how you can help this ministry do that which the Creator of the universe has tasked us to do. So let's get into it and see where it takes us. We went to Kenya, and our mission in Kenya revolved around Hillary's nonprofit 501c3 organization, Qumran Family Foundation. Short for QFF, or short is QFF, Qumran Family Foundation. We usually refer to it as QFF. In Kenya, we couldn't use that name, Qumran Family Foundation, for some strange reason that I really can't explain, and neither can Hillary. But it is Qumran for Fatherless Families in Kenya officially. The mission of QFF, or Qumran Family Foundation, or Qumran for Family or Fatherless Families, is to deliver critical resources and opportunities to Kenyan widows living in poverty, as well as the fatherless of Kenya, or the orphans. There is a plight, a suffering that is ongoing in Kenya that involves the widows of Kenya, as well as their children and orphans. Regarding the widows, these women are grappling with social isolation. They're grappling with abuse, health issues. Many of them actually still suffer from AIDS. When is the last time you've heard of somebody who is suffering and dying from AIDS? It is ongoing in Kenya, believe it or not. And they're dealing with financial struggles following the loss of their husbands, of course. QFF provides vital assistance to these underserved members of Kenya, of the Kenyan society, these widows, in an attempt to break the cycle of poverty. Breaking the cycle of poverty by providing these underserved souls basic literacy education that is then applied to moving these underserved souls into businesses and or providing them basic job skills that can help support them and their children. This, we have found, fosters a community of opportunity and growth. In terms of orphans or the fatherless in Kenya, the biggest challenge facing them tends to be, one, a lack of basic subsistence, and I'm talking about food and clothing. And two, a lack of finances to keep them in school and on to graduation and on to making a way in the world for themselves and eventually for their families to be. So that's sort of a general overview, a 30,000-foot view of what QFF is about. And you can find out more about QFF and what its objectives and goals are by going over to QumranFamilyFoundation.org. That's QumranFamilyFoundation.org. I'll put the link to that website in the show notes here for your convenience. So why Kenya widows? Why Kenyan orphans as opposed to American widows and orphans? Well, the biblical definition of the fatherless children and widows isn't as fully manifested in this country as in many of the third world countries of the world. The U.S., you see, has many government, social, and non-government organization programs that orphans and widows may have access to. They can get basic subsistence in most places of this country, if not all jurisdictions. Whereas in places like Kenya, there are no government or social organizations and programs that stand with the widow and the orphan. There are, of course, many non-government programs operating in places like Kenya that cater to the particular needs of widows and orphans. I don't want to make it seem like QFF is the only organization or nonprofit operating in Kenya with the orphan and widow in mind as its primary goal. But these other organizations, their actual effectiveness is often lacking, and they're lacking for various sundry reasons. And I don't want to get into some of the issues that we've discovered over the last 2 years, why these organizations are not doing what they've been tasked to do. Let's just suffice to say that many of these organizations are there to make $1 and a cent, or in Kenya, a Kenyan shilling, so that they can continue to function as a viable organization, pay their people, pay the higher-ups, and continue the flow of money through that organization. But the actual widows and orphans rarely benefit from these other organizations. Well, QFF wants to break that cycle. They want to break that ineffectiveness and bring true biblical-based assistance to these underserved members of Kenyan society. You see, in Kenya, widows mostly, they can't remarry. When their husbands die, their culture prohibits them from remarrying. It's unbelievable. We don't have that here in the United States. Many widows who suffer a loss, or who have suffered losses, are very free to remarry if they choose to. If they don't, they don't. But many do, and they continue their lives uninhibited. They can actually live decent, even carefree lives if they are in the right opportunities, if the right opportunities make themselves available to them, or they make themselves available to the right opportunities. Those opportunities don't exist in Kenya. This is a tribal issue. It's a tribal issue that only serves to harm the most underserved members of Kenya's many communities. Because Kenya is a patriarchal country. Not that most countries of this world are patriarchal in nature, but more so in the African countries, where the males dominate the women to such a degree that the women are actually shoved to the side or actually killed almost. And that goes back, I think, even to the garden, where the kingdom of darkness wages a war against the woman of this world, and more so in Kenya, where they are women and widows and orphans are kept oppressed, kept in poverty, kept in ill health, and many of them die. There was an incident on this trip that we took to Kenya, where Hillary met a widow, and she was suffering from the effects of AIDS. She had not been functioning at all for months because the condition that she had been suffering from as it relates to her AIDS that she contracted from her husband, who had no doubt contracted it from other women that he slept with or whoever. And so her husband died, and she has been dealing with the effects of her disease. And she couldn't function. And upon meeting with her, Hillary prayed for her and her healing, and she was healed. She wanted healing, but there was nobody who cared enough to go and see what her need was. And her need went beyond just the poverty that she was suffering. Her need went beyond just the family dynamics that were damaged and broken in her life. Her need was spiritual, one, and two, health, physical. And Hillary attacked both through QFF. QFF brought her there, and through the work of the Holy Spirit, this woman was healed. This is the kind of stuff that QFF seeks to bring to the underserved souls of Kenya, primarily the widows and the orphans. This is the kind of stuff that is needed, not this other foolishness that many of these other nonprofit or NGOs are doing over in Kenya to make $1.01. The other thing is, before these widows, before their husbands died, many of these widows did not receive education, nor did their husbands leave them any financial support or a financial base upon which they can function in the event that they died. So many of these find themselves in dire straits, so to speak. Their husbands die, and they are in poverty. They have no means to make an income. They have no education in which they can go out and get a decent job. So they're left to die. And if they don't die from diseases or from their lack of food and basic health care, because they have no money, then they're left to beg. They're left to be a burden on their society and their community because they have no job skills, or they don't have a viable business that will provide them an income. And this is what QFF is seeking to change. This has a serious trickle-down effect, of course, whereby the orphans, the children of these widows, have no financial base on which to subsist. And educational opportunities are generally hindered because of a lack of money. not to mention lack of food, clothing, and shelter, persist among the orphans as well as their mother. With QFF, we have an opportunity to keep the Torah mitzvot, the Torah instruction regarding orphans and widows, and to also effect, I should say, a positive change to these underserved souls' lives. To feed, to clothe, to shelter, to celebrate the feast with, to provide basic subsistence to them, or not so much to just give them a handout, but teach them, what's that old adage that if you give a man a fish, they can eat and live for a day. But if you teach a man how to fish, they can live a lifetime. This is what QFF seeks to do, not just give handouts. And that's what a lot of these organizations over there are doing. They're just throwing clothes at them. They're throwing food at them. They're throwing whatever else is out there. I don't know. We didn't have any other interactions, or we didn't have any interactions with these other organizations. We just know about these other organizations and what they're about. But QFF seeks to break that cycle of oppression and poverty by teaching them to fish so that they can live an abundant life. Teach them the gospel. Teach them Torah principles. Teach them to tithe and to give from the increase they will receive from the businesses and the jobs that they get. This is what we've been called to do. This is what we have the opportunity to do through QFF. How many widows, how many orphans can any of us truly say that we've helped in the last 10 years? Well, here's an opportunity to be Torah observant and to please and obey the Father above. Presently, QFF has 2 literacy classes for widows that are ongoing. There's one in Kahancha and there's another in Kissi. And consequently, QFF has received urgent requests to extend this program to other areas of Kenya. QFF is also working with an organization and a Messianic assembly referred or called Qumran Family Care in Kissi, near Kissi town. It's in Ogembo, let's just say. It's this ministry, this Qumran Family Care. Qumran is spelled Kuria, Qumran. Qumran Care Ministry, or Qumran Family Care, is a ministry that is a Messianic ministry, but it also supports 25 fatherless children, as well as a dozen or so widows. So they're doing the best they can, but this ministry lacks everything. They lack Bibles, they lack funds. The people give, they tithe, they give offerings, but when you are impoverished, there's only so much that you can give. But they do the best they can. But they need help, because just before we left, they were out of food and there was no money to buy food. So QFF had to stand with Qumran Care Family and at least buy them some staples in which they could at least have a few meals until they could get some money that comes in. So we're doing the best that we can with our limited budget to help the orphans and the widows and the ministry over in Kissi. As it relates to fatherless families, Torah instructs us to not afflict any widow or orphan. Exodus chapter 22, verses 22 through 24. Father executes justice for orphans and widows, as noted in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 18. When we go to the feast, especially the Feast of Tabernacles. Father commands that we rejoice at our feast, you, your son, and your daughters, and your slave women, and the Levite, and the alien, and here it is, the orphan, the widow that are in your towns. You must help them. You must tend to them. You must provide for them to also keep the feast, to keep Sukkot. That is our responsibility. We don't do that here in the United States. We don't care about the widows and the orphans, whether or not they have the opportunity to attend the feast. We attend lavish feasts, but you never see these poor folks there, these underserved members of the community there, because we're too busy worrying about our accommodations, our good time at the feast. Well, we're trying to break that cycle with QFF. Over in Kenya, at least, we'll be doing a lot of feast work to make sure that we are Torah observant over in Kenya with this program through QFF. And that's over in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 14. Father commands us not to subvert the rights of an alien or an orphan, and you shall not take as pledge the garment of a widow. In other words, don't take advantage of widows. And this is overwhelmingly seen in Kenya among the widows that QFF is serving. In terms of making sure that widows and orphans have food to eat, knowing that ancient Israel, our ancient cousins, were an agrarian people, Father commanded that when we cut down our harvest in our fields and hast forgot a sheaf in the field, we shall not go again to fetch it. We don't go back to make sure we clean out our fields. We make sure that we leave food for the widows and the orphans. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that Jehovah thy Elohim may bless you in all the work of your hands. So when you beatest your olive tree, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, for the widow. When you gatherest the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And you shall remember that thou wast a bondman in the land of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. Therefore, I command you to do this thing. In other words, we have to look after the welfare of the fatherless and the widow. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verses 19 through 22. And so when you have made an end of tithing, all the tithes of your increase, the third year, which is the year of tithing, and you've given it unto the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat within thy gates and be filled. We are responsible for feeding and looking after the fatherless and the widows. Are we doing that? It's a Torah commandment. We spend our time making sure we follow the biblical calendars, that we observe new moon celebrations, that we attend the feast at their proper days. But are we doing these mitzvot, these Torah instructions and commandments of making sure that the underserved members of our community are taken care of? No, we're not. And as I said previously, we don't really have that huge a problem here in the United States in many of our communities, because many of the widows and orphans are taken care of by various and sundry means. Well, in Kenya, there are no support systems, no governmental programs, no social programs. NGOs are not helping them. QFF is providing us the opportunity to keep this mitzvah. And when we miss this opportunity, We are missing the opportunity to please our Father and to obey. QFF is an opportunity for us to do what we've been instructed to do. Deuteronomy chapter 26, verses 12 and 13. Father warns, "Cursed be the one who deprives the alien, the orphan, and the widow of justice." And all the people shall say, Amen. Deuteronomy 27:19. In other words, we can't just step on the widows and the orphans because they are these poor, dirty, seemingly dirty, worthless people that society has cast this dim light upon. We have to be giving and loving and caring for these people. Again, it's not about just keep giving and giving and giving to them, but to come and stand with them and help them up, to empower them to be more than they are, to rise above their station in life, for God's sake, for Yah's sake. This is an opportunity for all of us to make a change, to make a substantive change in the lives of these souls over in a very dark place of this world. Honor widows who are truly widows. We're told in 1 Timothy chapter 5:3. We need to honor them, not look down upon them, not mistreat them, not ignore them or turn a blind eye toward them, but to honor them. Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our Elohim and our Father is this: to look after orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained by the world. James chapter 1, verse 27. This is what it's all about. This is what we were about, our Father's business, for 3 months over in Kenya. And as hard as it was, as financially tasking and difficult and challenging as it often was, physically, emotionally, mentally, and we're still working on dealing with all of these things, these challenges, even after being home for 2 weeks, it was well worth it because we saw the fruit of the labor that Hillary began back in December of 2024. Actually, she began in the fall of 2024 when our first trip to Kenya took place. Now, and I'm going to tell you a little more about this, we had 41 widows graduate from phase 1 empowerment training where they learned basic literacy and math skills so that they can be prepared to take on either new jobs that can help support them and their families, or they can start their own businesses. Many of Kenyans are business-minded folks, so they go out and they start their own businesses. So let me tell you a little bit about our trip, because I could go on and on and on about the biblical necessity of helping these underserved members of society and the Kenyan society. We began planning the trip, this trip that we took this past summer and fall, back in December of 2024, a couple months after our trip to Kenya in the fall of 2024. We began planning that early because QFF knew that we had to strike while the iron was hot with here. The need is great. The need is mandatory that we do something, and Hillary was burdened to do something. And although it's her nonprofit organization that she has created, and she put Qumran Family Foundation into existence, or through the work of the Father, over a decade ago. I think it was more like 12 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, but it has never really fully manifested or done anything because, again, the need is not this great here in the United States. She struggled to find orphans and widows who could benefit from QFF, the things that QFF would offer, the education, the assistance, the direction, the support that QFF was offering. It was not needed here. She found it was not needed in California, and she found that she really couldn't really do much here in Texas either. So we began, after learning the plight of the widows and the orphans, in the fall of 2024, Hillary and I began planning our trip for 2025 in December 2024. And so ultimately, after so many challenges to us departing and going to Kenya this year because of civil unrest and because of the weather was very challenging as well, we were finally able to solidify our travel arrangements and our lodging and all of that good stuff. And we departed from DFW for Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya International Airport, and on August 24th, Sunday, August 24th, 2025. And as I said, we were there for 3 months, and we returned November 20th, 2025, which was a Friday, 2 Fridays ago. And so, it was a long trip, very physically, emotionally, and financially taxing, but we praise Yah for the great work that was done. I have so much to share with you, but I think most of what I want to put forth to you is to go over to QumranFamilyFoundation.org and see for yourself the work that QFF is doing and how you can stand along with QFF and TMTO actually as well, because we are supporters and we stand shoulder to shoulder with QFF. TMTO does. So, of course, because she's Hillary, she's my wife, and of course I'm there with her. Whatever she needs, I'm there. So we operated in Nairobi, Kenya's capital, Migori, Kihancha, and Kisii. Those were the areas in which we functioned for 3 months. Not all. We systematically approached each and every venue throughout the 3 months, and we were able to accomplish quite a bit through Jehovah's help. Speaking of accomplishments, let me go over what was accomplished during our 3 months there, so you kind of have an idea of what we were about for that amount of time. And let me just say, financially, this came out of our own resources. We received let me back up. I would say 90% of the finances that were required for us to make this trip came from our own resources. We did receive some support from family members who gave very liberally to us. And we were very pleased with that. But generally, this came out of our own pocket. So we can't be said that we were fleecing the flock or that we took money from people to do this. Although we do need, QFF needs your help. QFF needs to raise money to continue this work because our resources, our financial resources are very limited. And we can't do this on our own because the need is so great. It overshadows our limited resources. We're retirees. And so we use our tithes and our offerings and our savings to do what we've done and that we're going to continue to do because that's what Father has instructed us to do. So the first accomplishment was QFF became certified in Kenya. It became a certified NGO, non-government organization in Kenya. So prior to our departure from the United States in July of 2025, QFF became registered as an official nonprofit or NGO operating in Kenya. Then on Friday, August 29, 2025, while we were there our first week in Kenya, in Nairobi, QFF received its KRA PIN number, which is a requirement in order for QFF to actually conduct operations and business in Kenya. Without that PIN, you cannot legally conduct business in Kenya. So, yes, we became certified to operate in Kenya, but we could not actually conduct financial transactions and businesses in Kenya until we got that KRA PIN. I think KRA is Kenya Revenue Authority PIN. It's sort of an equivalent. The KRA PIN is an equivalent to an organization or business receiving an EIN number here, an EIN here in the United States through the Internal Revenue Services. So QFF became an official non-government organization operating in Kenya while we were there. That was the first major accomplishment, let's just say. The next thing was the graduation. As I previously mentioned, the literacy empowerment course that QFF started was in Kahancha, the first class. It was a class consisting of 100 plus widows. Well, 41 of those 100 plus, I think it was just around 100, maybe 104 or 5, students who began classes in January or February of 2025. Well, of those 100, 105 or so widows, and it fluctuates because widows, some of them drop out, some of them just show up. And we're trying to get a hold of that because a lot of these widows are troublemakers, let's just say, and they come and they want to stir up because they don't. I don't want to get too far off the beaten path here, but there's a lot of challenges, and many of the widows who come in to QFF to be empowered and to be trained and taught are not there to be empowered and to be moved out of their impoverished state. They don't like this. They want to be given a handout. That's what they want. They hate the mission and the goal of QFF. So they come and they stir the pot. And there was about 4 to 10 of these throughout the year who have come and gone trying to disrupt the work of QFF. That's one of the many challenges that QFF face because many of these widows are very influential. The community of widows is very tight, believe it or not, in many of these jurisdictions of Kenya. So a lot of what they say, a lot of these disgruntled widows, what they say carries a lot of weight and influence. So they were successful in influencing some of their colleagues, if you want to call them that, and it just created a lot of problems for us. But in the end, 41 widows completed QFF's basic literacy course and empowerment course. 41. And these graduates were treated to a formal graduation ceremony to celebrate their monumental achievement on Monday, September 24, 2025, at the Calabash Hotel in Migori. It was a stupendous event. And it just jerked at your heart that these women, several of them got up and testified on how QFF has helped them learn to read, learn to do math, given them some level of self-esteem. Now they have a future ahead of them. They believe. And they are jazzed. They are encouraged. They are blessed. And it was a wonderful thing to see this happen. It is a wonderful thing. The other accomplishment was that a Kissi school officially opened. The second school, remember the first school where the 41 graduated widows were, is in Kehancha. We opened up a secondary school, Kissy. Kissy School officially opened on September 25, 2025. And we welcomed some 25 to 30 prospective literacy students, empowerment students. And Kissy's first literacy class, empowerment class, began on Monday, October 20, 2025. We only currently have officially between 16 and 20 students. Again, it's kind of at the opening stages where these widows show up sometimes and some of them don't. And so we're usually over time, the number kind of stabilizes. And so we'll see where that takes us. 2 teachers were hired on September 25, 2025 to conduct the teachings at the Kissy School. And they're conducting daily literacy and empowerment classes at that school as we speak. So that was a good thing, which, by the way, I neglected to say that we had 2 teachers that Hillary hired while here in the United States. She interviewed them and everything and looked into their backgrounds and all of that stuff. And back in February of 2025 for Kehancha. And they successfully graduated 41 of their students. So that's the situation. Now, the Kehancha School, from where the 41 widows graduated, well, we were forced to move that school because the spaces that we were using were no longer available to us. So QFF had to quickly regroup and find a new venue, a new place to have the classes. So especially for the phase 2 students. Now, there's the literacy, basic literacy, and the empowerment phase 1. And then once these 41 widows graduated, then they go into phase 2 where they learn basic business skills and basic job skills so that they can now become independent. Well, phase 2 class comprised the 41 graduating widows who would be taught business principles, job skills, and so forth. This class began with all graduating widows on Monday, October 20, 2025 at our new location, still in Kehancha, just down the road about a half a mile from where it was originally. Now, concurrent with the phase 2 class, a phase 1 literacy class also began on the same day in an adjoining classroom with 6 new students. Now, you may be asking, well, you started off with 100 students and only 41 graduated. Where are the other 60? Well, they kind of all fell by the wayside when they did not meet the passing grades that QFF established for basic literacy and empowerment. Many of them became discouraged and left. They came and tried to change the rules and said, no, we can't learn the basics. We can't function. We don't really want to do business. We don't really want to get jobs. We want QFF to just give us money. And that was a painful reality to learn, that over half of the widows that went through phase 1 training didn't really want to be empowered, really didn't want to receive literacy and empowerment skills, have no intention of being in business or getting jobs. They wanted QFF to be like all the other NGOs and nonprofits functioning in Kenya, and to be given money, to be given food, to be given clothes, and be given shelters. But that's not what QFF does, because if that's what we did, QFF would cease to exist very quickly, because financially it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. So 2 teachers were hired at the beginning of 2025, as I mentioned, and they have been teaching literacy classes the entire year at QFF. And currently, 1 teacher is conducting phase 2 classes while the other is teaching the 6 new students basic literary skills. The other thing that we accomplished was baptism, water immersion, and ministry. As I mentioned earlier, there is a Qumran Family Care Ministry, a messianic ministry with 25 orphans and about a dozen widows in another part of Kissi, completely different area of Kissi or Agembo, or I'm sorry, a different part of Kissi. Not Agembo is where Qumran is, the Qumran Care family is. But where the school is, I forget the name of that actual province, but it's about 30 minutes drive from Qumran. The school, the Kissi school, is about 30 minutes drive. Well, the Qumran Family Care Messianic Assembly, we were invited to Qumran Care on Sabbath, November 8th, 2025. And again, it's in Ogembo. And there were about 35, 40 souls in attendance, and Hillary and I delivered messages. We taught the gospel of the kingdom to this group of 35 to 40 souls at this messianic place called Qumran Family Care Messianic Assembly. And we were afterwards asked if we would partner with Qumran Family Care in delivering teachings to the fellowship's leaderships, or leaders, I should say, the fellowship's leaders, give them training in messianic principles, in Torah, in the gospel, in all things related, calendar, the feast days. These people have very basic understanding. So they ask us to provide them teachings. Stand with the ministry's orphanage that cares again for 25 children. And we saw them and met these children, and they are in tattered clothes and they're very skinny. They're not getting a lot of food. Their food consists of some rice, some cabbage, water, maybe some ugali, which is some made of maize, cornmeal. And that's it. That's their food. And so they need basic subsistence. And so they're asking us to stand with them on that. And standing with the ministry's widows, same thing. The widows need help as well. So from that, on the next day, Sunday, November 9th, 2025, we baptized or water immersed 8 souls from that congregation who had never been baptized, including the pastor. So I was blessed to actually baptize them, and Hillary prayed for the Holy Spirit to come upon them, come and dwell within them. So it was a blessed day, and we have officially decided to stand with Qumran Care family and do as they have asked us to do. We'll do the best we can. We're not sure how much we can, but we're trusting Father to guide us in that respect. Their needs are great. And unless we can have people stand with us to help us to deliver the gospel to that dark area of the world, then it's going to be very difficult. But Yah can do anything. And Yah, may He speak to you and others who are not listening, to help us deliver what is most needed: the word, food, and fellowship. As I mentioned, we hired, so we have 4 teachers currently, 2 operating in the Kahanchik school and 2 operating in the Kissi school. In addition, apart from those 4 teachers, we hired, or Hillary hired, QFF hired an office manager and an operations assistant, both of which operate out of the newly established Magori office. Yes, QFF was blessed to actually procure an office space in Migori, where the office manager and the operations assistant will work with the two schools to help better manage the widow's progress and the teacher's effectiveness in delivering the QFF curriculum of empowerment and literacy skills. And these two new hires function as QFF's eyes and ears and legs in Hillary's absence. Now, as I mentioned, there was a lot of personal and spiritual warfare ongoing during our time there. There was opposition to, as I mentioned, the work of QFF in Kenya. Not just the widows who were trying to poo-poo the work of QFF in the area of literacy and empowerment, trying to sway the other widows to just abandon their desire to rise above their impoverished state. But also there were other organizations, at least one that we know of, that was bad-mouthing QFF's work and making allegations about QFF that were patently false. And so we didn't give it much credence, but we learned very early on and very quickly that there was a move afoot to destroy the work, to inhibit the work of QFF. And that work goes back from entities that actually brought us there to Kenya in the first place in 2024. Somehow, these individuals who ask us to come and to establish a presence, to ask QFF to come and establish a presence in Kenya, became disenfranchised with QFF because those individuals wanted to control. They saw QFF as an opportunity for them to make money and to take over QFF and to make, a dollar and a cent for themselves. Well, when Hillary made it clear that QFF is not about doing that, they set about to destroy the work of QFF in various and sundry ways. And so we relied upon the Father, and Father was faithful and overcame all of the hindrances that these opposers posed. As I mentioned, in early 2025, there was political upheaval throughout the nation. The Gen Z uprising against the current Kenyan government stalled our trip. We were supposed to go out to Kenya in the spring of 2025. Well, they had an uprising in the spring, so we postponed our trip then. And then there in July, there was another uprising. It was a follow-up of the original spring uprising. So we had to cancel and reschedule our trip until August, the late August. So that was ongoing. Praise Yah, the political unrest or upheaval was over, at least for now. And we'll see where it goes next year because it's probably going to erupt again. We pray that it doesn't, but if it does, it may prohibit us from going again in 2026, or at least stall our going until the things clear up. Then there was this overwhelming presence of Islam throughout Kenya. Now, it didn't directly affect us, but we can see that Islam is growing rapidly in Kenya. As we all know, it's growing throughout the entire world. It's growing in Europe, especially, and overtaking Europe. And it's growing here in the United States. And here in Texas, it's really a major problem as Islam is just becoming this monolith. It's this thing that is threatening anything that has to do with the true faith once delivered. So, and then, of course, riding on those coattails, there's this ever-present darkness that pervades all of Kenya. When you arrive in Kenya and you're spiritually sensitive, as we are, you feel this heaviness, you feel this darkness. And it pervades, it inhibits your prayers. It inhibits your focus. It inhibits your study and your reading of scripture. There's just this darkness that's there. And that leads to this thing about lessons learned. We learned that there's massive corruption in all areas of Kenya, in the government, personal corruption, corporate corruption. And we learned that you can't trust anyone. Even those who you think you can trust often end up being corrupt. So we've learned to trust, but verify is not often an option, but one can't trust. One must learn that you can't trust at all. But one must always flesh out those individuals who you are working with, and then constantly monitor them to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. Because that's just the way it is. We can't trust many of the people that we contracted with. Case in point, graduation. We had to contract with many people in order for the graduation to take place. We had to contract with a caterer. We had to contract with the venue managers. We had to contract with the photographers. We had to contract with decorators and so forth. The vast majority of those contracts and contractors did not deliver what they promised they would deliver. In fact, we lost a lot of money because we trusted that they would do what they promised to do. The decorator didn't deliver what she promised to deliver, yet she expected to be paid, and she got paid up front for half of the work. Fortunately, we didn't pay the rest. That created a lot of problems. The venue managers did not do what they promised to do, yet we paid them quite a bit of money. The photographer horribly failed, and yet he got a good chunk of his money, and so forth and so forth. But it is just this constant thing that is ongoing in the Kenyan soul, is one of poverty. It's an impoverished mindset, and they seek to get over on anybody who they can. And we've learned, painfully so, that we have to be very careful when we seek to get someone to help us, to contract with us, to provide needed services and things, that we really have to be very careful and walk very slowly through a process to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for, and that the widows and orphans that we are serving and servicing are properly taken care of. And even the widows you have to watch, even the students you have to watch, because they're been brought up in this corrupt mindset and corrupt practice. A lot of it goes back also to the tribal issues that I don't quite understand that. We're learning about that, but it's still the same thing. So we have to be very careful. So the massive corruption is a lessons learned. We learned that Jehovah provides for all our needs when we trust him to provide. When we trusted Father, even when things got dark for us, he always delivered. Case in point, QFF, before we left, contracted to have our computers, have Chromebooks for the graduating widows. 41 Chromebooks delivered from California to Nairobi so that they could be given to the graduating widows, so that it's part of their empowerment and preparation for their businesses and job skills. It was a very important element of their training, was providing these Chromebooks, these computers, to the graduating widows. Well, the computers left California and arrived in Nairobi. However, the corrupt government held on to the computers for 2 weeks, and they demanded various amounts of money in order to have them turned over to us. So much money were that they were demanding from us because of what is it they call various fees and taxes and penalties they were demanding from us. And we were like, these computers were used computers that were donated to QFF by our son. They were in excellent condition. Don't get me wrong. They're not just trash. They were excellent operating computers that were donated to QFF. But the Kenyan government held them hostage until we paid. Well, we trusted Father to help work these things out. And we lovingly and patiently and respectfully worked with the Kenyan customs and government officials, and they ultimately gave in, and I think we paid a small amount just to save their face, and they released the computers to us. But this is the kind of thing that we learned, that when we trust Father and we act like people of Jehovah, and we do that which Father requires of us to show love for our neighbor and love for him, he will honor us and bless us and provide for our every need. He provided for every need we have. There were no failures. Even when we lost the venue at the Kahancha school, the first school in Kahancha, the classrooms, within a week, he provided another venue. And it was wonderful. It was like, we were like, what are we going to do? We don't know the area. We don't know the rules and all. It worked out. Father provided, and there's incidents, and there's over and over throughout our 3 months there where he proved himself faithful and he provided. So we follow the leading of Yah in every area of ministry as a lessons learned. Trust Father first. Make sure we're walking first in obedience, and that we're following the Spirit and doing that which we've been sent to do. And then trust. Trust and never doubt. He will surely bring you out. Was what the song we used to sing when I was growing up in the Baptist church. But it's true. That they get right. When we trust and we don't doubt, he will bring us out. And for me, personally, learning to like people. I have a big problem. I'm not a people person. It's not that I hate people. I'm just a person who likes to be alone. And so what this trip has taught me in those 3 months was that I have to learn to like people. Even those that are unlikable, I must love them. Love them as I love myself. Love them. Love them. And when I love them, I love Jehovah. And the other thing for me was actually ministering to the physically and spiritually hungry apart from TMTO. Over the last several years, my ministry has been through this platform, TMTO. Well, I've learned very much so that there is another world out there. There's another ministry out there that Father has in mind for me. And so I was blessed to have that as a realization, and I'm still reaping the benefits of that realization. So what is the need in Kenya as far as QFF is concerned? Well, we're being asked to expand the program, QFF's program, to 2 other cities, Kisumu and Migori. So we're going to need new teachers, and we're going to need new classrooms in these areas. We're going to need a vehicle. We found ourselves Father has always provided. He always provided transportation for us, ground transportation. Once we got there, we had no idea how we were going to go between cities, between Magori and Kahancha and Kissi. We had no idea, but Father provided that all. We just trusted Father, and He provided. Praise Yah. Well, we're going to need a vehicle. We have a driver, one of the hirees in the office, the operations manager or assistant is also our driver. He's a Kenyan, so he speaks. You really need to have someone who knows the areas in the country as well as who speaks and who has street smarts. Because a lot of, as I said, government corruption is rampant. And there, as you're traveling the highways and byways of Kenya, in these various jurisdictions, the police will stop you and try to extort money from you in order for you to let you go. Otherwise, they will hold you on trumped up charges. That's how corrupt it is in Kenya. Fortunately, throughout our 3 months there, we were never stopped once because our driver, who is now one of the office staff members, knows how it operates and how to get around these problems, this corruption, these corrupt officials. So we need a vehicle because we don't have one. And the vehicle that we had access to, we probably won't have any longer when we go back in 2026. We're going to need, as I said, classrooms for Magori Town and Kisumu. We need financial support for the orphans and widows of Kuria Care Family in Kissi. As I just mentioned a few times prior, these orphans and widows and the Messianic ministry in Ogembo are in dire financial straits. They have nothing. They don't even have food. From time to time. Last week, their water pump to the well they have on the property went kaput. It stopped working. So they don't even have a way to get water. So now they have to travel a few miles by foot and try to draw water from a local stream or river until they can get a water pump to pump water from the well on the property. So we're working on standing with them to get that water pump installed as soon as possible because these children need water, just like they need food. Funding for ongoing operations, which are now running about with salaries and monthly subscriptions and rent and all of that, is running just around $2,000. So we need to continue things. If they're going to continue, we're going to need to have support for the monthly expenses. And that includes, again, salaries, rent, subscriptions, and so forth. We're looking at returning in 2026. We're going to have a graduating class from Kahancha and phase 1 class and a phase 1 class in Kissi that are going to need to be graduated and move to a phase 2, as well as we're going to need to establish and set up the program in Kisumu and in Magori. My brain went away for that. So again, Qumran Family Foundation.org for donations and ongoing financial support and prayers are so desperately needed. Please prayerfully consider helping us, stand with us, and stand with the widows and orphans as Torah instructs us to do. So for 2026, we're looking to establish literacy and empowerment class opportunities in Magori Town and in Kisumu, 2 cities widely apart from each other. And we need that car in order to travel between them because I think it's a 4 or 5 hour distance between these 2 cities. And then, of course, the graduation of class 2 from Kahancha and Kissi. So that's the deal with QFF in Kahancha. And I pray that you will, that you got something out of that update for QFF and what we did over in Kenya for 3 months. And I want to now kind of bring this to a close, this update. I want to also let you know what's happening with TMTO ministry overall. We're going to continue our weekly podcast. As Father provides. As Father provides, we will continue. We want to pick up with the Melchizedek series, the Covenant series, and Sabbath Thoughts and Reflections weekly Torah reading discussions, as we did before we left in August. So we also are working on some publications, writing a book. I've been talking about this for a couple of years now. Well, the book had to be put aside this year for 3 months. The work on the book, because I could not work on the book while I was there in Kenya, because every day we were hitting the ground running every day. And it was very difficult. I did try to get some writing in while I was there, but sometimes the internet was spotty. Sometimes my computer had an issue where the battery actually blew up. So I had to get a new battery put in. So finding somebody to do that was a challenge, but Father again blessed and Father provided. Even when I thought, how am I going to find a Lenovo battery from my IdeaPad in Magori? He provided. So the publications, the books I'm looking at right now, working on, hopefully can get out sometime in the first half of 2026, Abba willing. True Biblical Baptism or Water Immersion, the Lunar Covenant, a book called The Root and the Branch, which traces the true faith once delivered from the apostolic faith up to today. What has happened to us? Where did the Messianic faith go wrong and degenerate into the Catholic Church and so forth, and into denominationalism and so forth? I cover all of that in this book that I'm working on. And the Beatitudes is another thing. So prayerfully consider, this is my call to action to you, prayerfully consider supporting QFF's much needed work in Kenya by going over to QumranFamilyFoundation.org and donating, as well as continue to stand with us here at TMTO and keep coming back and hanging out with me every week as we delve into the wonderful mysteries and the glorious blessings of Father's word in his true faith once delivered to the saints. And with that, beloved, we will bring this installment of TMTO to a close. And I pray you got something out of this discussion, this update, this last update for 2025, and that you will prayerfully consider standing with this ministry as we previously discussed. So please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions. The best way to hit me or contact me is through our email address, perceptionwp as in Paul @gmail.com. perceptionwp@gmail.com. And I pray that you have an overcoming and blessed Sabbath. And so until next time, may you be most blessed, fellow saints in training. Take care.